actor, so actors always bring changes of underwear with them. You never know when you're going to get rid out of town. So,
Brian Dennehy, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Before we start officially, I have to say, a year ago, I called Brian because our mutual friend, John Douglas Thompson, was here. Some of you saw that. And he said, Brian would be great. He's great with the students. And indeed, Brian yesterday did 3.5-hour workshop with our students, monologue training. It was fantastic. But when I come in to tell
they're all going to dental school now.
Which is funny because they weren't before. When I called Brian and asked him to do it, he said, yeah, of course, I'd be happy to do it. I like doing those sorts of things. I said, it's a great thing. We do it for students and for TheaterWorks patrons and community members. He said, well, of course, the only thing is if I get a Broadway gig or a film or something, I might have to reschedule. And then he said, I don't know if you remember this, he said, but of course I'm 76 years old, my name's not Morgan Freeman, so that's not going to happen. And then, of course, the punchline is we schedule in September and he gets a Broadway gig and a film. So.
Yeah. I got to leave at dark 30 tomorrow because I got to shoot on Thursday in Brooklyn. At Silver Cup Studios. Silver Cup Studios used to be the Silver Cup factory.
So actually, I want to start there. So and what you're doing now, you just finished Love Letters. On Broadway. Tell us a little bit about that show and how you came to it. You've done it before, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I did it with Carol Burnett, and we were both living down in Santa Fe at the time, and we became friendly. An extraordinary woman, and we were always getting requests to do fundraisers, and that's a perfect fundraiser. And it's never been done on Broadway in the 26 theaters. So Nell Nugent, who's an old producer friend of mine, decided to try to do it. And I started out, I opened with Mia Farrow, and it was got good reviews and was doing business. Mia got sensational notices and deserved it. And did 4 weeks with her and then 4 weeks with Carol, who came back, and we had a great reunion. And now it's Alan Alda and Candice Bergen. And then Waterston comes in, who's made for the part, Sam Waterston. And who the hell is he doing it with? I can't, if I don't study lines for 20 minutes, I can't. Forget about it. Anyway, but there's a group of people doing it every 4 weeks or so, and it's kind of fun. It's, as Nathan Lane, my very, very good friend for 40 years, said to me, "What's so damn difficult about it? You walk out, you sit down, and you read the shit." And they get paid too. I said, "Not as much as you, Nathan."
Well, speaking of Nathan Lane, you're going to be in a show with him coming up as well.
We're all going to be paid the same price. Yeah.
So tell us about that show. When's that start?
Well, I have done a lot of O'Neill, and one of which, of course, was Iceman Cometh, which I did in Chicago, I don't know, years ago, and then Dublin, and then London, and Paris, and playing Hickey, of course, the crazy bastard lead. And Nathan decided he wanted to do it. I mean, because Nathan's one of the great comic stars and a wonderful actor. We have literally known each other since 1975, I guess. And when he was part of a comedy team, a very funny comedy team, needless to say, went to New York and decided he wanted to be an actor. And a real actor. Started working with George Scott and Terrence McNally, and he became friends. McNally wrote him a bunch of plays, and he's become Nathan effing Lane. And anyway, so he's decided he wants to get his serious chops. Now he's done serious plays, but not O'Neill and not Iceman Cometh. We did it in Chicago very successfully. And now we're going to do it at Brooklyn Academy of Music in a theater, the Majestic Theater, which is now called the Harvey, which I christened It was an old vaudeville house. It was falling apart. And Harvey Lichtenstein, who was an amazing man who ran BAM in those days and completely rebuilt it, to Peter Brook's direction, rebuilt the theater so that it looked like a theater set with hanging curtains, ragged stuff. It was very, very effective. And I did Cherry Orchard there with Peter Brook. So this is the homecoming because I haven't worked there since. And Nathan has worked there a few times, but we're doing Iceman. He's playing Hickey. And John, who is stunning as Joe.
It's John Douglas Thompson.
John Douglas Thompson well, he's opening right. How's the
Tamerlane? It opened last week, I think. Yeah.
And he got a sensational notice. He's a wonderful actor, amazing, powerful actor, and he's great in Iceman. So it's we're doing that for 6 weeks, and
so you've got Iceman.
He goes back then to the comedy on Broadway for $150,000 a week or whatever it is he's making. We're all getting paid the same in Brooklyn. Bupkis.
I saw an interview with you a few years back. They ask you, of course, the 4 stages of Brian Dennehy, which are
any actor. Who is
Any
Brian
actor.
Dennehy? Get me Brian Dennehy. Get me a young Brian Dennehy. Who is Brian Dennehy?
And he says to me,
I'm in stage 5 now.
He says he's in stage 5.
The stage 5 is Brian Dennehy's dead, isn't he? Didn't he die? Well, he should have.
Or as Broadway gigs and work and O'Neill. And I should say, I think for every actor, there's also a seminal moment. And for me, I saw your Death of a Salesman, which, if you don't know, Brian Dennehy won the Tony Award for Best Actor for Death of a Salesman, and
I won two Tony Awards.
Yes.
Okay, Death of a Salesman and Long Day's Journey. Who won the Tonys were Arthur Miller and Eugene O'Neill.
Yeah.
Not me. I was just there.
We did a production of Death of a Salesman. Chris Lowell, who's here in the front row, played Willie. And for a generation, more than a generation, many generations. And
This was the kid that I liked so much yesterday?
No, this is Chris Lowell right here.
Oh, okay.
Kid you
Jesus, you had a rough night, Chris. I bet. Holy shit. He looked about 25 yesterday.
What? Talk about that. I mean, that you defined, and for so many people, who Willie Loman is, and how is
I'll let Christopher Plummer define it. Plummer goes to see, because I was always kidding Plummer. He was a wonderful guy and a great actor, of course, and it got to be 125 years old. He's still working, but he looks amazing. But I'm always kidding him about saying, Chris, you're the only really aristocratic actor in the Western Hemisphere. There's nobody like you. I mean, there's a couple of other guys, but nobody can wear clothes like Chris. Nobody can speak like Chris. Anyway, so I always say he was the great aristocrat. If you need an aristocrat, you got to hire Chris Plummer. So he comes after the salesman, and we're already laughing the minute he walks through the door. He says, if I'm the great aristocrat, he says, you're the great loser. You play losers better than anybody I've ever seen before. And when I did Long Day's Journey and played the old man, of course, he's another kind of a loser, and he had the best time with that. But I am very good at being losers. My old man would agree with that, too, to be honest.
But talk about that. You are attracted to, or producers are attracted to putting you in these incredible, iconic roles. Is that something you seek out? I mean, who gets to play
what
Willie
happens,
Loman
the real credit, I mean, aside from the playwrights, which I pointed out, is a wonderful director and a very, very close friend of mine named Bob Falls. And the other big factor is the city of Chicago, which is pure and simply the greatest city in this country and maybe in the world. And certainly a great theater city. And I went out a long time ago, got to be 40 years ago, to work in a small theater called Wisdom Bridge, which is in Rogers Park, which is the only non-gentrified neighborhood left in Chicago. It's a very interesting place. And we did a play by a guy named Ron Hutchinson, a wonderful Irish playwright. Bitter, funny, dark play called Rat in the Skull, an interrogation play. And we got sensational notices. And Bob did not direct it. Steve Rodman directed. But Bob was running the theater. He was the artistic director of this little 200-seat house way the hell up north, for which I think I had paid $200 a week. But I wanted to do the play. And I wanted to work in Chicago. Long story short, Bob takes me out for coffee. And, you know, he was the producer, as I say, of this little company. In the course of having coffee in this place in Rogers Park, he said, "You and I are going to do great things together." I said, "Really?" He says, "Next year, this time, a year after, I'll have the job at Goodman Theater." I said, "Really? From Wisdom Bridge right to the Goodman Theater?" And there at the Goodman, we're going to do all these great plays. Well, the rule was, and it was established that day at coffee, we're only going to do things that we're not sure we can do. Well, that was mostly true. The hardest stuff we did. Salesman, Long Day's Journey, Touch of the Poet. In any case, he got the job at the Goodman. And the way he got the job, the Goodman was broke like most regional theaters. And he walked in for the interview with the board, and all the guys were going in saying, "Listen, we'll do 3 or 4 shows with 2 characters. Won't cost anything. Single sets, you know, we'll get the deficit paid for." Bob goes in and says, "I'm going to spend so much damn money, you're not going to believe it." He says, "The first production we're going to do is Galileo, which is a huge production. 12, 13 scenes, costumes, music." He said, "And I'm not going to worry about the deficit. That's your problem. But I'll tell you the way the format is going to work. We're going to do great productions. We're going to make great theater. And the donors, they're the ones who really raise the money. They're the ones who really make the theater. They will roll in." And they did. He got the job by 1 vote. And we started off spending a fortune on Galileo, and we sold a hell of a lot of tickets. But more importantly, people who had money and, you know, who give to the arts and so on and so forth wanted to be involved. So 10 years ago, he built this brand new theater complex, which has essentially restored the area of Chicago just south of the river. And now it's all fancy restaurants and the 2 Goodman theaters. And he's an extraordinary guy. So he and I have done a lot of stuff.
Talk to us a little bit, Brian. We have a lot of students here who are actors and other local actors, but for the rest, a little bit more about how an actor prepares. You're given the role of Willie Loman. That sounds terrifying to me. What do you do? How do you even get started on something like that?
You do it the same way. I mean, you just start learning it, trying to understand it. I mean, since there are a lot of students here, I assume, acting, any art form, unless it's some completely primitive thing that I'm not aware of, but any art form starts with the intellect. It starts with understanding and studying and learning. When actors tell me that they're instinctual or instinctive actors, I get up and walk out. There's no such thing. Now, there are actors who appear to be instinctual. Brando is a perfect example, and a great actor. But Brando also thought and read and studied and prepared, which is what you have to do. And most of all, you have to try to figure it out. So that I've always read and read and read and read about. I got friendly with Miller, thank God he was still alive then, and picked his brain and read everything I could read about it. and studied, learned it. And what happens in acting, or at least it used to, now it's a little different because I'm a lot older, is you go out on stage and the play happens. You don't engineer it through, it just happens, which is the best way when it happens. It occurs. The work is all done, and you just have to pull the trigger. But look, I've been very lucky. First of all, I met Bob Falls. Second of all, I got to play great parts. Now, when you get the great part, you got to play the hell out of it, which, for the most part, I have done. But it's, I don't have any illusions about it. It's Arthur Miller and it's Eugene O'Neill. Now, you can fall down the stairs and give a great performance when you get up. If anybody writes words like that, we may get into it a little bit with looking at some of the stuff. But the point is, actors have to understand. Actors have to have a pride in what they do. They have to care about what they do. They have to work at what they do. But they're nuts if they think it begins and ends with them. It doesn't. Unless maybe you're Mark Rylance, who is the most extraordinary actor I've ever seen.
You were saying yesterday with the students, and of course you're saying this right now, is this idea of repetition. You work on a monologue when you're auditioning, audition monologues.
There's no such thing as knowing the part too well. Yeah. I did Salesman 860 times. In New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, London, Dublin, Paris. And the day I did the last performance in Boston, of all places, and Arthur came, and he came backstage. He said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Well, strange. But I'll tell you a story, Arthur." I said, I was driving, I live in Connecticut, way up in northern Connecticut. I was driving back on a Monday, or Tuesday. It was a show Tuesday night. It was the third or fourth week before the end. Now the show is part of you. You put it on like you put on a jacket, and don't worry about it. It's when it's fun. And something hit me. And I pulled off the road in Merritt Parkway into one of these gas stations. I sat there for 45 minutes in the car, and I went through 2 or 3 scenes that I had played 800 times and saw something that never occurred to me before. It's a constant process of discovery, which is what makes it so interesting. There's no such thing as giving the same performance every night. You don't. You can't. Not if you release yourself to what you're doing. Just, you've done all the work, go out there and let the show happen. And different things are going to happen. We discussed one famously in a production of Cherry Orchard I did, but which I'm not repeating for many reasons. But in any case, but it's, I can't imagine having done anything else. Can't imagine. Been very lucky. And I've been good and I've been bad. And it's a life. Turns out at the end, or close to the end, to be a life.
What is it about theater specifically? You've obviously made some of your fame in film, but you've gravitated towards theater a lot in the last 10, 15 years.
I wouldn't say I've made a lot of fame in film. I've been in a lot of
Rambo's
films.
a pretty famous Cocoon.
Yeah, well,
Silverado.
That's kind of a reflected glory, but which is fine with me. Look, I have no problem holding people's coats. And I held a lot of great people's coats. Walter Matthau and Lee Marvin and William Hurt. William Hurt's probably the best actor I've ever worked with, period. Crazy as a junkyard dog, but a brilliant actor. Love William Hurt. We did Gorky Park together, which is a good movie. And we were in Helsinki and then Stockholm. And that was when movies were really made that way. Not anymore. Unless you're Brad Pitt. I've been mistaken for Brad Pitt. Yes. Admittedly in a school for the blind, but that Brad Pitt?
It's the same
Hell
voice.
no, he don't have that belly. Go ahead.
But is there something about theater specifically that draws you in? Or I mean, I don't
The
want to
the
compare.
best definition of being a theater actor was given by Ralph Richardson, a wonderful British actor. He said, acting on stage is the art of keeping 800 people from coughing. Now, it sounds like a joke, and it is, but it is actually very true. Everybody always says, well, it's great, it must be great to get laughs, it must be great to get startled imprecations or whatever. And I said, no, the best thing is silence. Silence is what you're looking for. When you have 800,000 people and they're not fumbling for their goddamn program or turning pages or rustling around in it, when they're all sitting there leaning forward, all of them, individually and as a group, that's the payoff. Doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, and it better happen at certain times, but that's your challenge.
Yeah. Okay, this is, I warned you, the theater lightning round.
Yep.
You ready? Who's your favorite playwright?
Shakespeare. Has to be.
Favorite part you've ever played on stage?
Well, Willie is the obvious one but Willie is just so, I want to say F, but I'll say goddamn hard. It is, I mean, I was glad to do it, and I never wanted it to be over, but it was hard.
Yeah.
That's a hard part to play. I think probably I did a double bill. And as far as I know, I'm the only person who's ever done it, of Huey, which is a one-act play by Eugene O'Neill, a wonderful one-act play, essentially a monologue, and Craps Last Tape, which is not dissimilar. They were written about the same time. They were both highly acclaimed plays by an Irishman and an Irish-American. Of course, the Irishman was living like any smart, rich Irishman would in Paris, and not in Ireland. But those two plays put together were really an interesting challenge and so much fun. God, so much fun. I kind of like to go back and do it again, except I'm getting old now for crap. And somebody said to me, "Wait, you're going to play a cop?" I said, "I'm too old to play a retired cop."
Or what's the favorite theater part you haven't had a chance to play yet, but you would love to play? Or go back and play at a different age?
Yeah, I guess the part that I always feel I should have done is Lear. And I'm one of those actors, there are a few of us, who go see everybody's, and are. The problem is, it's only been in the last couple of years, because there was always something about it that held me back, aside from total fear. But I understood one thing about Lear that I understand now clearly. It's one of those plays for which there's no such thing as a good performance. There's no such thing as a very good performance. There are only towering performances. If you can't give it a towering, earth-shaking, shattering performance, why do it? Because it's the only play ever written. That's why I say Shakespeare before. And there are a lot of things wrong with Lear. I mean, there are a lot of things that he wrote because he had to write. It was the political stuff at the time, and he was just trying to survive with Elizabeth. Kit Marlowe didn't. But it's the only play ever written where, if it's done well, and that's a big qualifier, and the audience is ready to hear it, and ready to observe it, and ready to absorb it, It should take the audience individually and as a group and just shake the shit out of them. Because it's about one thing and one thing only. Life and death. It's not about sex. It's not about money. It's not about anything else. It's a man who has achieved enormous things in his life. And whether he has or he hasn't, he's going to a certain place. He knows it and he can't deal with it. Thank God he has the gift given to him of his mind unwrapping. But it's never very far away from what's coming. So that Philip Larkin is one of the most extraordinary poets ever. And unfortunately, I was going to bring the book of poems here tonight, but I said to myself, they are so depressing. Because Larkin always writes about that. And when Shakespeare wrote Lear, he wrote about the most important subject you can write about in terms of the way everybody lives. I mean, we all live our lives getting and having and enjoying, hopefully, and getting older. But eventually there's one subject that, nobody escapes. So the point about playing Lear is that if you can't do that, and I'm not sure I can, although I would like to take a whack at it. I'm too old now, probably. That's my excuse now. But unless you can do that, unless you can kill the audience, shatter the audience, send them out trembling, looking for the nearest bar, so they can sleep that night and then hopefully get up the next morning and keep going. That's how important that play is, and how difficult it is. It's incredibly difficult.
Do you have a Shakespeare monologue that you would say is your favorite?
Well, I have a piece that I learned. This is a setup, obviously.
How many of you knew that was a
It's like
setup?
working with Johnny Carson.
See, just a few.
I'm sorry, Ed, what was that? Well, Johnny, that thing we were talking about earlier.
All right, let me rephrase that. Would you do a monologue for us?
Yes. Now, you should understand that actually everybody in the business calls them speeches. But they are what Shakespeare did not probably invent it, but probably Christopher Marlowe invented it, the idea of the interior monologue. Well, of course, it's not interior because he's shouting it to a whole bunch of people, half of whom were drunk back in those days. But it's from the Scottish play, and I learned it when I was 14. One of the things I said to the kids yesterday, I said, there's no such thing, as I said before, as knowing a thing too well. If it's any good, you can't know it too well. And Shakespeare's always good. Even when he's bad, he's good. It's Macbeth talking to himself, trying to rationalize the forthcoming murder of Banquo, who was his friend. To be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he hath a wisdom that doth guide his valor to act in safety. There's none but he, whose being I do fear, and under him my genius is rebuked. As it is said, Mark Antony's was by Caesar. He chid the sisters when first they put the name of king upon me, then bade them speak to him, then prophet-like, they hailed him father to a line of kings. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown, put a barren scepter in my gripe, thence to be wrenched with an unlineal hand, O son of mine, succeeding. Rather than so, come fate, into the lists and champion me to the utterance. That's Shakespeare, and it's pretty much all Shakespeare, not that much Dennehy.
You've known it for 60 years, you said, and once it's in
Well, you know, it's the old story. As I said to the kids, sister, don't get in the way.
Yeah.
You want to try to understand and invest it with the emotion and the reality of what the rationale that he's proposing. But the main thing is not to get in the way. So that's
That was great. Thank you.
a fragment.
Want to do another one? No. If you ever want to break out in a monologue, just go ahead. Or speak.
Well, I got some other stuff, but we'll see. You know, people want to ask
Someone
questions,
else, when
whatever.
they come up to the mic, ask him to do another speech. But I should say, I'm going to ask you a few questions about film and some other things, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. So those of you who do want to ask Brian a question, there's a mic set up here and here. We'll do the best we can to get through as many as we can. But please, I apologize in advance if we can't get to all of them. So I do want to turn and talk a little bit about film. I mean, you speak about theater with
I never made any films. I only made movies.
Okay, so tell me the difference. Let's start there.
I did actually make one film, Belly of an Architect, years ago, which nobody saw.
And what classified Belly of an Architect as a film for you?
Peter Greenaway was the writer-director. And nobody here know him? So much for Peter. He made little British art films, and we made one in Rome, and it was really interesting. He had a guy working for him. He was a real serious intellectual, severe intellectual. And he had a guy named Walter O'Connell, wonderful guy, who was an American living in London, also brilliant. And I always called Walter his translator, because Peter would say, on this scene, I was thinking about the psychosomatic feeling of his sleeplessness from the night before and his relationship with his wife, which is irritating. And Walter would say, what he means is this. Walk over there, stop there, turn around, give us a little bit of this. I says, got it, Walter. Anyway.
But you did you did a lot of movies. You did,
Yeah, yes.
and how did you break? I mean, tell us a little bit about the beginning of your career, going from a football star to an actor. I said star, and then
there were no
drama
football stars at Columbia, believe me.
Shall I rephrase that? A football star at Columbia.
And if you were my orthodontic surgeon, you would say, yeah, some football star. Shattered football star would be more like it. But no, I went to Columbia. I went to Catholic grammar school and high school in New York, in Brooklyn. I was born in Bridgeport, but that was during the war years, the pre-war years. It was all my family were factory workers in Derby and Shelton and Ansonia, Connecticut. My grandfather worked in a factory in Bridgeport. They were all Irish immigrants. And anyway, we moved to New York when I was a kid. Lived in Brooklyn and went to Catholic school there. And it's as simple as this, really. Because I think about it a lot. I had a great teacher. One great, life-changing teacher named Chris Sweeney, who had come back, a kind of a war hero from Korea, had played football at Fordham. I don't know how. He's about 165 pounds, tough guy. Spoke wonderfully. He spoke, Mr. Dennehy, please. And he started a drama group. And I was a sophomore, so I was 14 or 15. And the first part that I played was the Scottish King. And it was an all-boys school, with the neckties, which they wore for 4 years straight without ever cleaning the tomato stains off of them. And people in the business for years have said, oh my God, you played that part in a school for all boys in Brooklyn in 1953? That took guts. And I said, not as much guts as the freshman who played Lady Macbeth. That really took guts. And he was pretty damn good, too. Suspiciously good, as I remember. But anyway, that's how it started. And I did a little bit of stuff in high school. And then when I went to Columbia, I was a football player, which kind of unofficially ruled me out of the players, which were dominated in those days by Brian De Palma and Terrence McNally. And McNally years ago reminded me of me wandering down the hall towards the Columbia players, fascinated by what they were doing, and kind of being laughed out of the place because I had my football blazer on. Anyway, went in the Marine Corps. I was in the Marines for 5 years. Never did anything in college. Never did anything in the Marine Corps. I got out. By that time, I had a couple kids. And I was driving a truck because it was a hard job, which I could do physically, meat truck. Go to work at 4 in the morning, I'd be done at noon. And I made some pretty good money in those days, 60s, early 60s. I was making $500-600 a week because nobody could do the work. Gave me time to go to auditions. I started making the rounds. Did a few off-Broadway things. Came back from a 2 or 3 weeks job up in Summer Theater, up someplace in Massachusetts. Don't remember. I remember we did, oh God, what was it? Bus Stop, Winyamange. And someone caught me in the Equity Lounge. God bless the Equity Lounge. I was a member of the Equity this time. I had done a couple of these things. And said, you know, they're casting a play that you should think about called The Comedians by Trevor Griffiths. Mike Nichols is directing. All these magic names. Right? And there is an open equity audition, which is, of course, hilarious. I mean, you go to the theater and you get on the end of a line, which I'm telling you is 300 people long. And these are all the guys, because it was mostly guys. And you go up and you get in front of the ghost light, and there's this girl out there who's 19 or 20 who works for the casting director. And her job is to get through the union-required process of these equity auditions. And I can't tell the joke because it's a mixed crowd, and you probably got some young kids here. But anyway, it's all about a guy who's trying to be a comedian. And I got up there finally after 3 hours, and I said, I don't want to do the dialogue. Right away, which got her attention, although I didn't mean to. Because the other guy doing the dialogue is a stage manager. Well, I think maybe you should go over there, and just think, what do I need to listen to that crap for? Let's forget the dialogue, just do the gag, which we did. Thank you, she says. I walk out the door, and my pal, Chris McCarran, we hook up. We're going to go get some coffee or something. And behind me, all these guys lined up going in. The little stage door bangs open. This girl comes out. She said, Mr. Dennehy, can you come back at 2 o'clock? Now that's 68, 69. And I can still remember the emotions of that moment, because something inside me, and it's funny, inside Chris too, we're looking at each other. Something had just changed. And I went back that afternoon. I worked like hell on that joke. And who's there but Mike Nichols, Trevor Griffiths, Alex Cohn, the producer, and some other people. They introduced every one of them to me. And Mike says, I understand you don't like doing the dialogue. I said, well, there didn't seem to be any point with that Locks who was reading the other lines. Very good point. Well, just tell the joke. I start telling the joke. And within 2 lines, Trevor Griffiths, the writer, is roaring with laughter. Great sound. And I finish it, and they applaud. The 4 or 5 of them. Nichols comes down, I reminded him, I saw him last week just before he died, 3 days before he died, and we talked about this. He remembered some of it. And he looked up at me, he said, "Where did you come from?" And I said, "West 46th Street, like everybody else." He said, "Oh, you're a comedian too." So then he says some very complimentary things, winding up with the great line that every actor wants to hear, "We'll be in touch." I didn't even have an agent, so we had to deal with that when I got off. But anyway, as he turned to walk up the aisle, I said, "Well, sir, that is indeed praise from Caesar," which, of course, is a Shakespearean quote. And he turns around and he says, "Yes, it is." And that moment, that day, that afternoon, changed everything. It was like a door was unlocked. I was invited through. And I've been on the other side of that door pretty much ever since. That's how it happens. Now, you have to prove yourself. You know, they get the part, and you've got to make it work. And at the same time, not get in the way. But it's been worth it. It's been worth it.
You were saying something with the students yesterday. Maybe you could repeat in a way. You've had the privilege of playing such amazing parts. But when you're talking about film and television, as you said, you're going to occasionally get a turkey.
I'll do any crap that comes along.
So talk about that. I mean, you have such a respect.
No, I mean, the interesting thing for television and movies, not all movies, some movies are really good. I've made some really good movies, made a lot of crappy movies, and done a lot of horrendous television. And your job becomes going on the set and trying to rescue whatever the hell that moment is. And sometimes you do, sometimes, you know, you beat the bear, and sometimes the bear eats your ass. And the critics line up with their baseball bats to say, "What the hell is he doing in this crap? I'm making $65,000, that's what I'm doing for 5 days." But that's, you know, I had kids in college. I've already put 3 kids through college and graduate school and law schools and everything else, and helped them with houses. And I got, now, because I'm 55 years old, and I say, "Yeah, let's get married. Let's have a couple of kids." Not thinking about 75 when it's time to go to college. But anyway, he's graduating this year. To what, I have no idea. But and she's got a couple more years. And
I've got a couple more questions I want to ask you, but if we get to bring the house lights up, that would be great. So those of you who do have questions can start coming down so we can go
and we get to look at you.
Forth. So if you have a question, come to one of the mics and we'll do the best. But while we're getting people ready, I since you brought it up about turkeys and good films, what are some films that you're really proud of that you've done, that you think are really great?
Well, the one that I had the most fun making, which turned into a pretty good movie, but I had fun because of the people who were in the movie, was Cocoon. I worked with Hume and Jesse and Maureen Stapleton, whom I love Maureen. And every anecdote about Maureen I cannot tell because it involves the foulest of language, which she used, not me. But anybody who knows Maureen, and just a great broad. But Jack Gilford was this wonderful, sweet, terrific actor, and Don Amici. I worked with Don Amici. So anyway, and Ronnie Howard, who's a certified and very rich genius.
So Cocoon for sure, but if you're to tell people the ultimate 4 or 5 Brian Dennehy films,
well, pictures, I like pictures that other people don't like. I mean, I love Gorky Park. First of all, I worked with Bill Hurt. If anybody wants to see one of the great examples in American films of film acting, see 2 pictures. What was the one about the trip that he made?
Anyone? Oh, Accidental Tourist.
Yes, Accidental Tourist and Gorky Park. His performances in both of those, and I was with him in Gorky Park, and he ain't no walk in the park, but what an actor. He's just the most amazing actor. Not given the parts anymore because he's difficult to work with. He's hard to work with, and he's never changed. He's always been hard. But as far as I'm concerned, if I was the director, man, he'd be right there. He's an amazing actor.
So we
Film actor, great film actor.
we must go see Gorky Park and Cocoon. Anything
And
else?
what's the other one that FX? That was fun.
Hmm.
The first FX, second FX was not good.
Well, someone I forgot asked me in the lobby to ask you when you're making FX3. So there,
That's right.
there are people who want to see that.
We're just looking for the right nursing home. You got to learn how to act wearing an oxygen mask. Then we'll be ready.
Let's do questions from the audience. Go ahead.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about what, in your mind, makes a really good director and what kind of relationship you want to have with a director? For instance, when you're doing something like Willy Loman that's really hard.
That's hard. That's an interesting question. It's a hard one. There are all kinds of directors. There are directors who mini-manage and micromanage, and usually they're pains in the ass. But sometimes they come up with great stuff, and you want to be a part of it. There are other directors who is it? Nichols. Nichols used to say it was probably one of the great. I've never actually worked with him, despite all this stuff despite his importance to me. But Nichols always maintained, I'm not a great director. I'm a great caster. Because if you get the right actors to play the part, and you really know who they are, I mean, everybody knows about Bill Hurt, but they just don't want the grief, the difficulty, because he struggles. He has to make everybody his enemy on the set, and he has to conquer them in order to give this performance. As Lee Marvin said when we were doing Gorky Park, just be who he wants you to be. Play it. It's a great actor, giving a great performance. That's what's important. Well, a lot of people say, no, that's not what's important. I want to have a good time. I don't enjoy myself. I don't need the grief. But in any case, I don't know, guys. Silverado was a fun picture because we just had a good time. I was like, cowboys and Indians. Little pictures I made with a picture I made with Gene Hackman, which is one of my favorites because of him. And hell, I don't know. Of all that crap that I did, you come up with a handful, same handful. Gorky Park was a movie that I loved making, and I look at it and it holds up. It really holds up. Silverado holds up, but Cocoon, of course, is a sweet picture. But God knows I made a hell of a lot more than that, and I can't even think of what they are, which tells something.
Go over here as well.
Sir, I've seen your pictures, First Blood, that's one I remember, and Cocoon. You played, your character was such, how do I put it without
Prick.
being rude? Yeah, exactly, in First Blood, but your character in Cocoon was more sensitive. How did you prepare for both parts?
There's really no way of preparing for an extraterrestrial. Which, of course, I said to Ronnie Howard when I got the part, and everybody was making the same money, which was all right. It's not bad. But, so I said to Ronnie, I said, because he was explaining the script to me, and we were talking about it. So I said, let me get this straight. I said, this guy, who's a brilliant extraterrestrial, comes to Earth and assumes human guise. Yes. I said, how come he assumes me and not Robert Redford? And Ronnie says, we can't afford Robert Redford. We can afford you. But true story. True story. Ronnie's the best.
Tobias.
Hi, I've been told many times before that performing on a stage
We
is...
resemble each other?
Yeah, actually.
Happens all the time.
I've been told many times that performing on a stage is profoundly different than performing in front of a camera. Can you attest to that? What are the differences?
Well, the biggest difference is, the camera's right here. How do I say this without making it sound like the most incredible cliche? Unfortunately, it is an incredible cliche. an actor a long time ago, and I can't even remember who it was anymore, says in film, you figure the performance out. You figure what the person is doing and what he wants to communicate, either vocally or, more importantly, through his eyes, through his reactions. And then you hide it and let the camera find it. The camera's job is to find it. Your job is to feel it, play it as minimally as possible, depending upon, of course, upon the scene, and let the camera find it. I mean, to this day, because I'm working Thursday in Brooklyn on this thing, to this day, I established a relationship with the operator, with the guy who's looking through the lens. And even on this project, and I said, okay, here's what I want to try to. I want this flicker. I want this expression in my forehead, whatever it is. I want to, in this particular line. And the director bothers directors sometimes when that happens, but the guy will always go like this. Or he'll say, now that's charting out a performance. Sometimes you can just play it and it'll happen. And you feel like the whole scene plays. You know, in movies you're shooting a master, sometimes you're shooting a long distance shot. And of course by the end of the day when you're really most tired is when you're doing a goddamn close-up. But it always works out that way and you get used to it. Solving an acting problem in the movies is technical. Okay? Solving a problem on stage is spiritual and emotional. It's rational. I mean, you're always listening to the audience, even watching them out of the corner of your eye. You want to create certain effects, but you can grab an audience and just jam them together and pull them towards you if you have enough of the right energy and the right commitment to it. You can't do that in a movie. You have to, it has to all be much, much more subtle. Unless you're, you know, an axe murderer, you know, which is easy enough because of special effects with the ketchup bottle. That was great, great take.
Thank you.
Alex.
I've noticed throughout your career that, like, you've done a lot of mixtures of drama and comedy. And I want to ask, like, is that really important to you to have a good mixture of both? Is
I
that
love
important
doing
to
comedy. Very few people give me a chance to do it. I mean, what's his name? The guy that runs Saturday Night Live. He gave me a chance to do it, and with what the hell's the name of the one?
Lauren.
Tommy Boy.
Yeah.
And
Chris Farley, right?
Chris Farley. And Farley and I had a great time together, and it's funny. And I'm funny. But, you know, I did Death of a Salesman. I did Long Day's Journey. You can't be funny. You can't be funny. His one Tony is for Miller and O'Neill. He's a very serious actor. I'm not even a serious person. But you're an actor.
Do you find that doing both helps? I mean, one helps the other?
Well, I never get a chance to do comedy anymore. I mean, there are funny things. I mean, Crab-Sized Tape is very funny. And Iceman Cometh is funny. I mean, the great story about O'Neill is he was writing simultaneously towards the end of his writing career. He died in 1954, but he was an active writer up to 47, 48. And he got this disease, this very weird disease where he literally couldn't write anymore, and he couldn't dictate, and he couldn't type, so he just stopped. What had happened, of course, is somewhere in the mid-30s, he was just old-fashioned. Nobody really cared about Eugene O'Neill anymore. So what happened is he started writing like a... And from 1936 or 37 to 1945, he wrote 4 or 5 of the great American plays. Great plays. Iceman Cometh is one of them. Certainly the family play, Long Day's Journey. He was writing Long Day's Journey in Dow House in California, just outside of San Francisco. And he was suffering. It was always suffering for him to write, especially about his family. And Carlotta later writes, his wife, I could hear him crying in this writing room that he had, and cursing and moaning as he forced himself to remember this stuff. So he writes a letter to a friend of his, lawyer in New York. He says, I've stopped work on the family play. That's what he called it, the family play. He says, it's just too painful. It's very difficult. But I've started writing something else. I'm having a wonderful time. Every day I'm just laughing all day long, just laughing my ass off. And that was Iceman Cometh. Only Eugene O'Neill could have a good time writing Iceman Cometh. But the first act is very funny. But the only place that anybody ever got it funny from the get-go was Dublin. Because everybody's sitting down like they're going to Mass, it's Eugene O'Neill, Iceman Cometh. I'm not even going to tell you what the title means.
Oh, no, I think you should.
Because the title's a joke. Does anybody here know what it is? The Iceman Cometh is based on a joke about the Iceman. The man comes home from work, opens the door, and he yells upstairs to his wife, was the Iceman here? Has the Iceman been here yet? She says, no, but he's breathing hard. Because he's upstairs with the wife. But anyway, Iceman came on in 1945 and rejected completely. Badly directed by the wrong guy, starring the wrong guy. And then, of course, 1954, he dies, or 53. A year later, Jason Robards does it at a little theater. Jose Quintero directs, and all of a sudden everybody says, wow, the greatest writer of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. Where you been for the last 15 years? And then a year later, Nathan does, with Frederick March, Long Day's Journey. And of course, so that's why I say, you don't win the Tonys, they do.
Christian?
You've spoken a lot tonight about a lot of the directors that you've worked with, and you mentioned briefly working with Bob Falls earlier. And
I didn't work with him briefly, but I spoke about him briefly.
And from distance from Colorado to Chicago, Bob Falls is one of my favorite directors in the country. And I know that I, as an actor and as a director, there's directors and actors that I consistently always want to be in the room with. They're the people that I enjoy working with the
Do you know
most.
Bob?
No, I mean, I follow him on Twitter.
You're ahead of me there. I have 3 Twitter accounts, which I do not write. My daughter's very upset. She said, this guy's really stupid. I said, okay, let him think I'm stupid. I said, I'm not getting involved in that crap. I don't even know how to get on Twitter or Facebook or whatever the hell it is. Anyway, go ahead.
And I just wanted to hear more about what being in the room with Bob is like, and why you guys continue to go into these these heavy fights every night.
Well, it's funny. We've had some fights, and we're going to have a couple with Iceman because there are a few things that I want to do that he didn't want to do before. Bob Falls is a genius at getting out of the way. First of all, you do a great play. We did great plays, even the plays that were obscure and difficult. Touch of the Poet. Nobody does that play. It's a wonderful play. Hard as hell to do. But he starts with an idea, mainly for a design, and that's where we've run afoul a couple of times. Desire Under the Elms was awful. And the designer... Get that taste out of my mouth every time I... think of him. But anyway, but that was only the only real disaster we had was Desire. And we disagreed about it completely, right from the beginning. But that's not bad for the kind of relationship that we've had over the years. He wants it to be real. He wants to hire the best actors he can get. Sometimes it's true in Chicago, and sometimes it's not. But there's a lot of good actors in Chicago. And he appreciates these plays. He appreciates these and wants to do them. And he works his ass off. He's like me. He takes essentially an intellectual approach, and then tries to find the emotion that potentially could be attached to that. Intellect is everything because there are words and ideas. You can't escape the intellect. And actors who do make usually big mistakes. And if they don't, their intellect is working also. Anyway, Falls is a great, great director and a great friend, and has been so responsible for so much that I've gotten in my life that I'm completely aware of, and that I make sure I go out of my way. And the same opposite is true. I mean, I've had a big effect on his life, being there with some of these plays. And we both understand that about each other, and we are generous with each other about that.
We have 4 more people up here, and I think that's all we'll have time for. So let's go over here, Cynthia.
Oh,
Sir,
Cynthia.
No, she's right here.
right here. I'm vertically challenged. Forgive me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. No, it reminds me of the great Biden thing.
If this makes it a little easier.
Remember when Biden says, "There's a great friend of mine there. So and so run the Montgomery Democratic Party. Stand up and say hello." My buddy, the guy was in a wheelchair. His good buddy, and had been in one for 20 years. But that's Joe Biden.
Forgive me, but I absolutely hate
heartbeat
it when
away.
people
What?
do that. They're like, stand up, you're all, problem. Anyway, you talk a lot about this not being in your own way and getting out of your own way. To you, when you're playing a part, be it in theater, film, whatever, what is it when you're in your own way, and how do you get out of your own way?
Well, sometimes the material is so bad you want to get in the way. You want to stand in front of them and say, "Over here, folks, look over here. Don't pay attention to that shit." No, I mean, when I say that, I mean, if you're dealing with Shakespeare,
Yes.
or Miller, or O'Neill, or you name them, you've been given this incredible present, fragile present, because it's easy to break or bend or screw up. Mm-hmm. And we see it all the time with actors who devastate roles or productions.
Bad Shakespeare.
So you have to reach out and grab the audience at times, usually with your emotion, the truth that you're trying to find emotionally. But most of the time, you stand in back of the words and the ideas and the sentiments and the intellect, because it's not yours. You are lending yourself to it, but don't get in front of it.
Gotcha.
Does that make any sense?
Yes, thank you.
I doubt that it does, but I understand it myself, and I try to explain it, because so many times you'll see actors think they're acting their asses off, and what they're doing is they're acting the part off. The part disappears.
Right.
In their own, energy, their own good will, their good wishes, but think about it. Just think about it. Think about it. Use your intellect. Think about it. What's happening here? It's like the little bit of Shakespeare, Right. It's an interior monologue, but it's his thoughts made palpable and hearable. Yeah. And I don't know, it's funny. There are times when you just do let it go, and it's right to let it go. And but you got to work on a play. You get 4 weeks rehearsal, right? But you got to work on it long before that. It's funny because I talk to Nathan all the time. And he's doing this thing where he's making a ton of money. He's wonderful in the play. He's hilarious. He really is a great actor. And Stockard Channing is also wonderful in it. The play is very light. But the audience loves it. It's funny. Yeah. But he's not thinking about that at all. He's thinking about Iceman. As am I. Because you got this, you're kind of walking down this path, and you're saying these words, and you're saying that, and so forth, and you have a little bit of a bump in the road. But all of a sudden, there's this big freaking mountain out there, okay, glistening in the sun, and you got to climb up that bastard, and it's there. That's what you're thinking about.
And here I thought all you were thinking about was preparing for Colorado Springs, and then now I find out.
I would have worn some sweaters if I had.
And then just these 3 more things, Cynthia, over here.
The first thing I do, get off the plane, says, where are the mountains? Says, well, it's foggy today. It's foggy today. I get here, it's foggy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
When it comes to films, animated films,
I've
such
done a
as
couple of them, yeah.
Especially Ratatouille, which I know you were in. What kind of headspace do you have to put yourself in when you know the audience isn't going to see your face, and especially Ratatouille, you're not even playing a person, you're playing a rat.
Well, I'm playing the king rat's father, right? The main rat's father. And when I read it, and that was a long process. I mean, we went through 3 or 4 different producers before we finally got to the big guy, who has since moved on to. He directed Cruise's most successful Mission Impossible movie. But immediately when I read it, I thought of Jackie Gleason in The Entertainer. So that's what I did. I did Jackie Gleason, stole whatever I could from Jackie Gleason. That was not an intellectual exercise.
Gentleman here.
Brian, I loved doing Rambo, and my children obviously.
First Blood. Rambo's a different movie.
Rambo First Blood. And,
First Blood was the first movie, and there was not going to be any Rambo. There was nobody was thinking of any sequel. You brought it up, so it's an interesting story. And what happened was, Ted Kotcheff, a wonderful director, made the film. We shot it, unbelievably stupidly, and I don't know how they did this. We began to shoot the film, which is all exteriors, okay, virtually all exteriors, in the woods in Vancouver in October. The sun comes up at 10, and it goes down at 2 or 3, and we're out in the woods with flashlights in the daytime setting up shots. It took forever to shoot, but in any case, I don't know, where the hell was I going with this?
They weren't gonna make another. They weren't gonna make.
No, they were gonna make another. What happened is they ran out of money. These 2 guys from Toronto. So they assembled some stuff that we had, and they went down to the show, for producers show in L.A. And they got the rest of the money, and they came back and they looked at this stuff. They had looked at this stuff, and we're getting ready to shoot the scene where he gets killed. I kill him. And the 2 guys run, he's not dying. He's not dying. Forget that. Rewrite something else. You get killed. As it turns out, I didn't get killed because they didn't know. And all of a sudden, that's when it started. And they made 5 or 6 of them, whatever it did. And of course, the luckiest guy in the world was Richard Crenna. Crenna got the job 2 days before we started shooting. Kirk Douglas pulled out. Crenna was called on Friday. He was shooting a scene in Vancouver or wherever the hell we were on Monday. And he proceeded to do 5 of them. He'd come in with the beret and says, John, you can't do it this way. Cut, print, perfect, go home. I used to see Crenna all the time. He's a wonderful guy. And he'd say, man, that was the luckiest goddamn day of my life. He said, I don't even have to change wardrobe.
So changing gears, my ultimate point was my favorite movie is Tommy Boy.
Of
And
course.
somebody else mentioned that before, too.
I die in the first reel. So, of course, it's your favorite. I know a lot of critics would say the same thing.
We watched it last night. But my point being, I have 3 sons, and Chris Farley in that movie is the most insane, crazy, manic, hilarious,
Well, you should have seen him on the
talented
show.
guy.
Actually, you should have seen him in real life. He was a very sad guy. It's interesting about Chris. A lot of these guys, I knew a lot of them. One of my best friends for years was Sam Kinison, who was the craziest of all. And I can't quote any of Sam Kinison any place. But YouTube him if you dare. But the point is, they were all comedians as a group are, what's the word? They're always on, or they're sunk in despair. Robin Williams is the best example of all. You could not be more talented than Robin Williams. There was no actor, there was no comedian who was ever more talented. There was no more actor who was more talented than Phil Hoffman. And it's not enough. It's never enough. Well, I remember saying to Hoffman, I remember saying to Richard Griffiths, great British actor, who won the Tony for History Boys. And he was so excited about it, knowing he was going to do it. And I'm saying, Richard, it doesn't change anything. You got to understand that. All of this stuff, being in the movies, making money, getting awards, doesn't change a goddamn thing. You still have to. It's not going to bring you what you think it's going to bring you. And I don't give a hell. I mean, you can have the biggest, fanciest yacht in the world. It's nice to ride around on it, but it's not going to change what's going on inside you. And you have to protect that if you're trying to be an artist. You have to protect that innocence, that sense of doing it for the right reasons. Even if it's crap, you're doing it for the right reasons. You're trying to make it better. You always try to make it better. And that gets around. Because there's a lot of producers of crap. They say, hey, get Dennehy, he'll make it better. And I will. Because I don't want to just go through the motions. But comedians never, comic actors never get enough, never find enough appreciation. That's why they're comedians. They want love. They want to be loved. They get up, take huge chances on a small piss-ass stage someplace because they need to be loved. And as an actor, I'm trying to do something else. I'm trying to challenge myself in some way to see if I can make it work. And it's all about me. It's about how I think. Well, you want other people to get it too, but the severest critic is me. And it should be that way.
I know there's another element to that question, so go ahead.
Well, my question was, I'm glad you touched on that because that's the direction I was going. Farley's life was obviously tragically cut short, but I think of my own 3 sons, and they're so energetic and so frenetic and crazy and funny. How can we channel that into a positive direction? How could someone like Farley have taken that to the next level?
Well, Farley came from a wonderful family. He had a great Wisconsin family, great parents, great brothers. So we can't use that excuse. Robin had a lousy childhood where he was kind of unloved and uncared for, which, of course, made him become what he was. And a lot of comedians do. I mean, God knows nobody had a worse life than Richard Pryor, ever. His mother was a hooker. He lived in a whorehouse. You got to really work at it to get past that. But the problem is, and the psychiatrists say this all the time. People say, if I can only do this, I'll be happy. That has nothing to do with it. Happiness is a decision. It's a decision that you make. It's not imposed upon you or given to you. There are things that can make you happy, like having a lot of money. But it's all temporary. It's a decision. Am I going to be satisfied and relatively pleased by what I've done over the years, or am I not? That's a choice that you make.
We have time for one more question.
I feel like, as the last question, I should ask you for another monologue. But
You don't have to.
but the question I was going to ask was, what's your favorite memory from filming Silverado? Because that's one of my favorite movies.
My favorite moment is when, after we had the final gunfight scene with Kevin, which I lost. It's funny because a year later, my agent calls me. She says, "They're doing a sequel to Silverado." I said, "Darling, I was killed in the first one. Maybe I could have a twin, like Jack." She says, "Oh, Christ, that's right, you were killed." So how did you like that movie? Anyway, so Larry had a camera. They used to, in those days, the Kasdan brothers would take like home movies of the shooting, just so they could remind themselves of something. They have a camera back. And Kasdan says to me, "You beat him every time." So they had to shoot the moment where the bullet hits off the church bell, right? Because I miss. Anyway, I'm half of it. I'm kidding, but Kasdan did say, "You beat him," because those are single action revolvers. You know what a single action revolver is? You have to cock the hammer. And he wanted it to be. My thumb was so mashed up and cut, and we didn't shoot, thank God, with black powder, but they're single actions, and they are a pain in the ass. Now you could fan them. I can't remember what I did. And I wanted to die a little bit more extravagantly. He said, "No, go down, you're dead."
Brian, before I say thank you to wrap up, I just want to thank all of you for being here. We'll be looking forward to FX3 and Silverado 2 coming up very shortly. I want to say, though, on behalf of the university and TheaterWorks, thank you always for your generous support and coming and supporting the arts. And I would be remiss not to re-mention that TheaterWorks is opening the Lionkind this week, and our next Prologue guest, 2 in 1 week, Clancy Martin from UMKC, who's going to do a lecture on the art and psychology of lying, which I know is going to be fantastic, and that's coming up on Sunday. You can take photographs now, as so many of you are, which leaves me just to say this has been an honor hosting you. I know you have to get to New York to shoot a film. You just finished closing on Broadway.
Well, I wouldn't call it a film.
Well, a movie, a motion picture.
It ain't even a movie. It's
infomercial. What is it?
It's a TV miniseries, or it's a long form miniseries. It's actually pretty good.
It's going to be good.
It's being produced by Steven Spielberg, so yeah. Except I don't think he read it.
So when Brian calls me up, now I have to say this. Brian calls me up and says, "Yeah, so Spielberg calls me and wants me to do this thing. We need to look at the flights." I said, "Oh, you have Spielberg call me."
Well, Spielberg didn't actually call me. Somebody from Spielberg, and this is what happens. Steven wants. So
you're doing
who am I to say no?
Brian is running out tomorrow morning, an early flight to do that. And all that to say, you've had an incredibly busy
I got to take the covered wagon to Denver.
We got to take the covered wagon to Denver. And we are so grateful you could join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.